would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Welcome to the Sharing Circle podcast. My name is Arno Kaplan, and today we are welcoming Wade Griffin, Director of Indigenous Engagement for BGIS, to talk about his background, the Indigenous engagement at BGIS, and many other things. Wade, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad I could join you on this fantastic endeavor that you're doing.
Thank you very much. So Wade, you started this position in 2019, and I wanted to ask you, can you talk about your background and childhood?
Sure. Like a lot of Indigenous professionals, there's no real typical childhood. I grew up off. I was raised by my Irish grandmother. Okay. My family on reserve is Mohawk, but I'm still going through discovering that myself. So I am a status card carrying First Nation individual. On there it says I'm Tuscarora, but that's because of my grandparents. My grandfather was actually Tuscarora during the band council impositions of the 1920s when they forced band councils onto the First Nation communities. They went from maternal to paternal societies. And then, so that's where that identity came from. And then when I did some research, I found out that my grandmother was actually Cayuga and that her grandmother was an adopted Mohawk. So I'm still going through the process of relearning my own history. So I have not been able to learn my language yet because I still haven't been able to get that final little piece in. But it's like 90% that we're Mohawk, so I've been self-identifying as Mohawk. And getting ready to start learning the language, which can be a little bit challenging too. So growing up, I said I was off. Grew up in a small rural area, so similar to that of a lot of Indigenous communities. We didn't have plumbing. We had no power. It was very remote, and went to a very small country school. And my mother was struggling a lot during my childhood with alcoholism. And would take us out of school. So I actually started kindergarten and grade 1 in a small school, but I finished grade 1 in one of the largest urban schools in North America, in Detroit. Actually, most of my grade 1 schooling was in this very urban area that I don't know if you know much about Detroit in the 70s, but it was a very dangerous location too. We had this thing where it was a do not respond zone from Friday sunset until Monday at sunrise. So we got through that, and when I came back, I was a good runner, and I had a better appreciation for the full pantries at the farmhouse. And then school was somewhat stable through grades 2 and 3, and then again grade 4, my mother decides to pick us up and move us again. So it was a neighboring community though. It was Waynfleet. Originally, I was in an area called Caister Centre, South Central Ontario, I guess, Southern Ontario. And grade 4 was in that area, and then we came back at the end of grade 4. So grade 5 on is where the stability really started to kick in. My grandmother formally adopted us in grade 5 or 6. I can't remember exactly right now.
And is this in reserves?
This was all off. So
off reserve.
Yeah. So I really hadn't had a lot of exposure other than my mother bringing me back to the reserve from time to time. So I did know my grandparents. I just didn't know them well. And then high school was pretty typical. You know, I played a lot of sports. Didn't necessarily concentrate on school a lot. I was lucky that it came easy though. And decided early on that I was going to go to university, and ended up going to McMaster. But even in high school, you know, all through elementary school and high school, I would never tell someone I was Indigenous. Because that always led to conflict. Playing hockey and sports, the other teams, if they found out, they would say racist terms, and they would try to get in fights with you and different things. So it wasn't a positive thing at all. It wasn't until I went to McMaster in first year university was the first time I was kind of exposed to a positive outlook on culture and an appreciation for what that heritage could mean. But again, even at Mac, there wasn't any real support systems. It was like there's a term called only lonely, and that's when you're the only Indigenous person there. And it wasn't until the last 5 years or so I've been discovering people that are Indigenous that actually did go to Mac at the same time I did. We just didn't know each other at the time.
Okay.
A big school, right? Thousands
Yeah.
of students. But yeah, it was at Mac that I started to take a little more pride in that background.
Okay.
And I was doing my undergrad in Indigenous Studies as well. So I met some professors and instructors from Six Nations.
Okay.
So my undergrad, the head of the department was Don Hill and Rick Montour. Rick now is the head of Indigenous Studies at McMaster. He's actually on a sabbatical doing a language endeavor with Six Nations, trying to preserve some of the languages that are in danger of being lost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so universities start to identify a little bit more job placements. Start to find, there was some advantages to being Indigenous. So that led to my first couple of jobs. Started off with Petro-Canada,
Okay.
then went to Shell. So kind of a stereotypical going into the resource sector piece.
Oil and gas.
Yeah, oil and gas. And then I ended up going away from that and going into entrepreneurial endeavors.
Okay.
I had a disc jockey company. So I started off doing weddings and then bars and clubs and corporate events. And it grew over the years. I think at its peak, I had 12 people working for me. And
Oh, quite the thing.
by the time I had wound things down, I had done over like 2,000 weddings and various events. It was a mix. Taught
DJ
me-
Wade.
Yeah, yeah. It taught me a lot of diplomacy, though, because when you really think back on it, taking care of someone's wedding is a large responsibility.
for
It's a very significant point in their life. So to have that privilege, at the time, I probably didn't really appreciate how much of a privilege it was. But in hindsight, I'm glad I treated things the way that I did.
Yeah.
And yeah, so to learn those aspects, I always took it on. And my job was to make their day as enjoyable as possible by making sure they didn't know what things were going wrong. And that's what it was about. You're selling peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly. Like
and
for you, when you're a DJ, like it's your job, but for them, it's one day in their life. So it's
Yeah.
like it's the good
Oh yeah.
way.
Well, yeah, even in when I was doing the bars and clubs, I always said my job was not to make people dance. That's the easy part. That's the secondary piece. The primary piece in the case of a bar is you're there to sell alcohol, because the bar exists by selling beverages.
Yeah.
So if you can help them sell more alcohol, then you're more productive and hence worth more. And that was the approach I always took. How do you add value?
Okay.
Even at BGIS, I look at, I report into Rich Coleman. My job is to make his job as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he needs to find somebody else that can do that. That's what this is always about. I try and teach my kids that. If you want to find a way to earn money, find a way to make someone else's life easier with a task they may not want to do or they can't do. If you can do that for them, you've created value. That's this is all things are about value creation.
Solving a problem.
Exactly. Yes. And then I did some time with commercial insurance. I found that I was a great student, but a terrible salesperson for it. With insurance, you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. I always found the insurance companies want you to sell more products, more margin, and the customer always felt that you were charging too much, that they were being sold too many things. So it's trying to find that happy medium. And I was always trying to find, be a problem solver. You only need this much, and so that's why I didn't necessarily excel in insurance. It taught me a little about risk management.
Yeah.
And understanding contracts.
Okay.
So that part was good.
Oh yeah.
And then hospitality. I got exposed to, again, the business of food and beverage and entertainment and how that machine works and how to differentiate yourself in a market. Again, a lot like insurance. A drink is a drink, a burger is a burger. The experience is what people are buying.
Yeah.
So those were things that I was had an appreciation for and had to find out, how to kind of differentiate yourself and create that value, that relationship with the customer.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that you worked in different sectors, but you took, the best you could from each of the sector in which you worked in.
Always.
So it's,
yeah. I try and do that in life in general. And again, I try and convey that to my kids.
Yeah.
That, you're going to be doing a career of some sort for a long time. It's best to try and enjoy it as much as possible.
That's true.
And again, if you can't, move on. So again, my road has not been straight, but the skill sets and the connections I've been making, they're all kind of culminating now.
That's it.
And so when I was doing commercial insurance, I was trying to set up an Indigenous insurance company.
Okay.
Because I saw the need.
Wow.
At that time, it was just too much too soon. So this is pre-2009.
Okay.
Now we're starting to see more appetite there. I know that the Cree and Quebec, they have their own insurance company.
Okay.
But again, they're only insuring one community, so it's a bit of a challenge when you do that. You have to diversify, so you got to spread your risk around. So, commercial insurance, again, I was doing some more entrepreneurial endeavors. We did some direct mail operations. Again, learned about how that works on the marketing aspect and mining information to make sure you're getting the right target market for your advertisers.
Yeah, sure.
So again, these are all I think skill sets that really come in handy when it comes to targeting things that we're doing, specifically on the Indigenous front, and potential opportunities for the Indigenous market itself, in marketing, in insurance, in hospitality. All of these things I see as being potential areas of opportunities. The other thing too is you put a challenge in front of me. I don't necessarily concentrate on the challenge. I try and see how there's an opportunity to address that challenge and turn it into an economic opportunity.
That's good. That's good.
Because again, the challenges are always going to be there, and there's going to be new ones every single day.
Yeah.
And I know in work, one of the things that people that work with me will be able to take note is that I don't take no. It's always no for today. It may not be no tomorrow or the next day or the next day, but I don't let go of those things.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be that stubborn. And whether it's even though I wasn't raised on reserve, having that gene in our system, I guess, is part of it. But there's a reason why the Indigenous community has been resilient, through extreme trials over the centuries. And we're still here. We weren't supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I think that is in who we are, our genetic makeup.
Yeah.
And that stubbornness, I think, is starting to pay off. We're getting to that seventh generation that people talk about so much.
Yeah.
And that's where the change is really starting to come in. And I do see a world of opportunity for my kids that I didn't necessarily have for myself.
That's true. That's true.
They are identifying as Indigenous, and they're proud of it.
A world with more hope.
Yeah.
And with more self-affirmation and all
Yeah,
the good
and
things that come with it. Yeah.
It's a privilege to be able to do it, because so many of our people don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be in the minority of the group that are able to, one, break that chain of destructive behavior that's in a lot of our families, and to turn things around so that my kids' children will be like the first generation that's whole. They're going to have grandparents. They're going to have professionals that are around them that they know and are related to. That's how you have that change, because it wasn't there for so long. And the family cycle of my mother was broken. I know that. She was a day student at the Mohawk Institute in Brantford.
Okay.
And my grandmother would have been a full-time student for residential school.
Okay.
And I'm sure her mother was as well, because it was one of the first schools that opened in the 1830s and didn't close until 1970. So a lot of our family went through there.
150 years.
Yes, I was actually lucky that I was just born late enough that I wouldn't have gone there.
Yeah.
So again, just being able to address that and the impact that it has on family, because when you don't know how to be a parent, that transfers to your children and so forth. So it's been a bit of a learned process, and I think I've learned a lot. I've got a lot more to learn for sure. But I know that my kids are definitely in a better spot than I was.
Yeah, like the community they grow in is more solid perhaps than the one you grew in, or
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
It's been volatile. We have successful business people, and we have a lot of people that aren't successful at all, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So there's a real mix there. It's the largest Indigenous community in Canada, almost 30,000 citizens of Six Nations.
Okay.
And we are spread across the majority of Canada and the U.S., a number of states, and Ontario and Quebec as far as provinces go.
So wait, what is a land acknowledgement, and why is it important?
Well, let's start with the land acknowledgement you did at the beginning. We talked, there's a number of pieces that go in there. So it's the community that would be associated with the land, in this case, the Algonquins. And then we talk about the status of that particular area as well. So in this case, you mentioned unceded, unsurrendered. Yeah. Some land is treaty land. Other lands are traditional lands. These are all things to take into account. And then kind of bringing it all together. So these are things that the Indigenous community has been doing since we've gotten together. It's no different than if you go to someone's house for a house party, you probably bring them a gift or thank them for inviting you. Yeah. That's exactly the same type of process. Yeah. So we're coming into someone's community, we're thanking them as a guest for allowing us to be there, and for inviting us in and treating you with hospitality. So that's where it stems from. Our role as land stewards is an extension of that, and that responsibility for the area where we live, both not just both, but land, water, and air, taking care of all of those aspects. And one of the concepts that we have as Indigenous people is we don't own land. How can you own something that's there before you or after you?
I understand.
You can only take care of it for the time that you're here.
Yeah.
It's going to be here long after you're gone. So these are certain aspects. So land ownership is a very foreign concept. It's a very Western concept.
I understand.
And hence the exploitation of land is also very foreign to us. It's a Western aspect as well.
Yeah.
Rather than exploitation, it's about a balance of living in unison. It's there for your coexistence. You take only what you need and you give back so that future generations have that same benefit. Hopefully it's left in a better state. So that's kind of that mentality that all stems from, and that responsibility to that land, and for your guests to honor that responsibility that you've taken on.
Yeah.
So that's really where that kind of comes from. So it's important to do that at important meetings or ceremonies or gatherings. It's just a matter of respect, I think.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that connection and respecting that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read that Indigenous people were nomadic before, so it joins the fact that you're saying that the land belongs to no one. It didn't belong to a particular tribe or something. So
Yeah, and that stems from a couple of things. So one, it's hunting seasons,
yeah,
following the migratory paths
Yeah.
of different animals for food and for survival, clothing and everything else. And then it also was a matter of, one of the echoes of that is the overlapping land. I don't know if you've heard anyone say, but Canada's covered by more than 100% of Indigenous treaties and claims. In a number of areas, you've got multiple claims that are overlapping.
okay, yeah,
And I'll give you an example. So back home at Six Nations, that land around it is all treaty land of the Mississaugas of the Credit.
okay,
Or so I've been told, as I have learned some of their history. And I see, the treaty land, and I see that it's acknowledged by a number of those entities. Six Nations, our claim is that our land is unceded and unsurrendered. We did not sign a treaty,
okay.
but it doesn't mean we don't have claim to the land. So again, you've got two different groups
Oh, okay.
that are laying claim,
Yeah.
different claims
Yeah.
to that same land. And you can have this in multiple areas across the country.
Because one group has a treaty and the other doesn't.
Yes.
But they both are in the same land, so
Yes.
yeah, it's like
Yep.
okay, I understand.
And we do have
the
certain
challenge.
things, we have a Jay Treaty, and there's the Beaver Hunting Grounds and the Haldeman Tract. There's all these different overlying pieces of information. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is very few people have actually ever read the original full documents.
Okay.
And that is where an area of misinformation can stem from.
Okay.
And understanding the spirit of what those documents are. And it's the spirit is where a lot of the challenge takes place between the Europeans that signed or had those documents signed and the view that the Indigenous peoples were taking. Because from the Indigenous perspective, even the treaties were about land use, not about land sale.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of those
misconceptions.
Yes,
and
yes.
misunderstandings between
and that's where
both
we're seeing
parties.
these things take place in court now. And the vast majority of the court rulings are in Indigenous favor. I just attended something called Indigenomics with Vanessa Dreckman,
Yeah.
our Eastern manager.
Yeah.
And there was a lawyer, a non-Indigenous lawyer, that's been tracking this. And I think he said as of October of this year, it was like 353 wins and less than 10 losses.
Okay.
So he goes, when you take the Indigenous peoples to court, the odds of winning are not in your favor.
Yeah.
Now, this is primarily based on forestry and mining challenges, but it does stem into land rights and treaties and different interpretations as well. So we're all starting to see this come to fruition.
So back to the BGIS role.
Yep.
Did you face? So you started at BGIS in 2019.
Yep.
And you started this position was basically created when you came in. So Director of Indigenous Engagement, we didn't have this position before you came in. So which challenges did it involve?
Well, the one good thing was that there was a familiarity both between the leadership at BGIS
Yeah.
and myself.
Yeah.
Because I had met the CEO, Gord Hicks, and at that time, the SVP, Claude Bougeot.
Yeah.
Prior, when I was in my role of acting CEO for the Mississaugas of the Credit Business Corporation.
Okay.
We had met with BGIS, I think it would have been Q1, so January, February of 2018. And that was the first time I really met Claude. But I was approaching things from a business perspective. Here's
Okay.
the things that the business and these three groups do that intersect the business services that you currently do, but here's what we could do together. And I vividly remember him coming up to me at the end of the meeting saying, there is something I specifically have to talk to you about, but it's going to take some time.
Okay.
So I think that's exactly when he would have been entertaining the need or figuring out how they could address that need for an Indigenous engagement role.
Okay.
And then in the spring of 2019, we started talking. May and June, we were negotiating, and then I was finally able to get everything finalized. And even though I was security cleared in my role with the Mississaugas, they had to transfer that, and it was just one of those things that took some time.
Yeah, it takes some time because you were. So you are the Director of Indigenous Engagement for the government contract, is
yes.
that it? Okay. This
The
is why you
RP1
did the
contract for
RP1.
PSBC, yeah. Yep.
Okay, only RP1 contract.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they brought me on board, and it was really a blank slate. So they were clearly taking a chance on me, and I was taking a chance on them.
Yes.
And again, I was in that role of the only lonely, because there was, at that time, no other identified Indigenous support people or people to work with.
Oh yeah.
And I started off with, well, let's take a look at your program, see what you have going or don't have going.
Mm-hmm.
And the mentality I was using was that we need a starting point that we can evaluate our growth against.
Yeah.
And even though you may not be happy with your starting point, at least it's honest. And now we can measure our growth. And in retrospect, because I took a look at the same set of questions I had asked earlier this year. And out of 15 questions, we had 14 no's on things we weren't doing.
Okay.
Fast forward to this year when we did it, it was 7 yeses and 6 in process.
Okay.
So on 15, it was encouraging.
On different projects you were trying to move forward, is that it? Create?
Just the program in general.
Okay.
Taking a look at how we were addressing procurement opportunities,
Okay.
how much we were spending,
Okay.
how many vendors we had, how many employees we had, all of these different aspects.
Yeah.
And so there's something called the PAR, the Progressive Aboriginal Relations Program, by the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business.
Yes.
I've used a lot of their guidelines as a basis for questions and kind of framed them specific to our industry.
Yeah.
But then when you frame it back, it's like, okay, this is the stuff that we're doing well. So even though we weren't pursuing that PAR designation from the beginning, I thought it was a good framework to build our program with. What could we aspire to do?
Yes.
And fast forward to 2020, I was tasked with creating a playbook, if you will, for Indigenous engagement. And of course, I got caught up in the exercise. It's a corporate term, and because there isn't one particular action, there's several, and they interrelate. It ended up becoming initially labeled a handbook, but again, not great terms in the Indigenous front. So when I socialized the finished product or the finished draft of the product with the Indigenous community, both government people, community people, business people, they all said the same thing. They said, well, you're not actually going to call this a playbook or a handbook, are you? Because that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what would you suggest then? They said, well, what are you trying to accomplish here? I said, well, we're trying to find a way to build and establish and maintain and grow relationships that actually do have meaning for both sides.
With Indigenous communities.
Yeah.
And
They said, well, give it a name that's reflective of that. So we ended up calling it Two Paths.
Yeah.
And that was our corporate address to call to action number 92,
Okay.
business and reconciliation. So
Yeah.
it's one of the 94 calls to action by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We've actually answered that.
Okay.
And that framework has become the basis for a lot of our Indigenous engagement programs. So there were 5 pillars that extended from that.
Yeah.
We have, transformative leadership. We have the recruitment, retention, and advancement of Indigenous talent, or people and culture, for instance. We have procurement champion. So how do we indigenize the procurement system that's in place? Business and economic opportunities. We now have a partnership with English River First Nation
Okay.
under Desnetti Group. It's called Ethelholtzy.
Okay.
So and that's been moving along over the last many months, but it's coming along now. And then we had the community engagement or the relationship building aspect of it. So we have these 5 pillars that kind of shape our efforts and where we're focusing time. And then, of course, there's communications. And the communications ties everything together. So kind of building all that through. And the overall process is kind of a 3-step process. You got to learn things first. You're going to reflect on what you've learned, because a lot of times what you're learning is challenges your current knowledge base or challenges the way you do things.
Yeah.
We are challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
And I frame it as it's a massive change management exercise.
Yeah.
For doing this properly.
And perhaps it's, we have to check also in the policies of the company if some elements
Absolutely.
are...
In a lot of cases, though, those policies could be barriers or challenges to what we're doing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd probably be doing it now. And then finally, we are going to act or take actions. And that's what this address did. So when we answered call to action, we had, I think it was 51 responses or actions. So one of the challenges I had, people like, great job, but 51 actions, you're going to drown people in opportunity.
Yeah.
How do we do this? So I said, going back on, one of my previous lives, hospitality, I said, well, let's take a look at it as if it were a menu. You go to a restaurant, there's all kinds of items on the menu. You don't order everything because you're not going to eat everything.
Yeah.
Let's make a meal out of things.
Yeah.
So let's start breaking these things down, those 5 pillars, along with communications. Maybe, one of them is an appetizer. One might be the main course. One might be dessert. One might be coffee. There's different things we're going to do here to create a meal. And each year we're going to evaluate that. So that's the approach we've been doing.
Yeah.
And it is working. We break things down into bite-sized chunks. Our land acknowledgement process is becoming more entwined.
Yeah.
My end goal for that is that we are treating it the same as we do take suit for safety. We do a great job at that at BGIS. If we can get land acknowledgement to that level and that same meaning and connection, then we've done the right job. It no longer has to be an action. It's just part of our corporate fabric.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we're doing on many fronts here. So that's kind of how we shape things. So again, we've got the 5 pillars.
Yep.
We've got the 3 processes in place. Again,
Yep.
learn, reflect, and act. And that's kind of shaped our role. And now we're kind of bringing everything together. And, you mentioned policies. We're taking a look at policies.
Yeah.
We've recently drafted and implemented now a global Indigenous policy.
Okay.
That is guided by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP.
Okay.
There's very specific instructions in there.
Okay.
So because it's global, we're using that as a framework.
Okay.
Then we have a Canadian reconciliation policy, or a reconciliation policy for Canada.
Okay.
That's guided by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We also have a reconciliation policy for Australia. Can't remember if that one's posted yet, but I know it's in process. And that's guided by their documents.
Okay, yeah.
I don't have enough knowledge to tell you what those are,
Yeah.
but I know, one, they're about 5 years ahead of us.
Okay.
It might even be more. So we were 2015. They're more than 5 years ahead of us. So they had a jump. I believe the Australian team is on like version 3 or 4 of their reconciliation plan. Ricky Cooper, the lead down there, she and I have been collaborating for the last couple of years. Her background's HR, mine's more on business development aspect.
Okay.
So we really complement each other. And one of the things we've learned is that while we're so far apart, our challenges that we face are very similar. And it's also that support system. Again, because she was by herself in Australia and I was by myself in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
So just be able to have that support from another professional was incredible to have. And she's thriving down there. Our program, I think, has grown incredibly over the last 4 years.
Okay.
So again, lots of good hope for what we're going to be doing in the future as well.
It's good. It's good. Like the Indigenous engagement in Australia was already built and perhaps thriving when you came in 2019. So you collaborated with Ricky Cooper, the Indigenous engagement manager in Australia, to help you build Indigenous engagement in Canada for BGIS. It's
Exactly,
great.
yeah. They were kind enough to share their, they have a RAP, a Reconciliation Action Plan. That's actually a national endeavor they have, and there's varying degrees to it.
Yes.
So they had shared what they've been doing. So it gave us an idea of what we could be doing, and then adapting it, of course, to the needs of Canada, and then specifically for BGIS.
What are the challenges that we're facing at BGIS currently regarding Indigenous engagement?
I'd say our biggest challenge is going to be capacity to meet the demands of what's there. We're starting to show different things that we can be doing. For instance, on the procurement side, getting more vendors, getting more spend.
Yeah.
getting more employees involved, getting employees who are self-identifying, attracting new talent. We've recently this year hired an intern on as a contract employee. We want to get more of that.
Okay.
We want to start to scale that. So having the right support systems in place to do that.
Yeah.
But for instance, on the Indigenous engagement team, so one for myself, we added 2 managers, one for the West, one for East.
Okay. Yeah.
But going forward, we need more capacity because
Okay.
there's only so much that 3 people can do
Yes.
on a national platform.
Yes, I know the 2 managers, Vanessa Dreckman and Christopher Hans.
Yeah.
They travel a lot in the region, which can be a challenge, though. So yeah.
Challenge is one, or travel is
Yeah.
one challenge. But just like, for instance, we're doing something called vendor engagement workshops.
Yes.
And, traditionally, procurement's been where it's held in an urban area. So, for instance, Ottawa would have an event, and they have the Indigenous businesses come to them.
Okay.
The view that we've had is that to make this more successful and more respectful, we need to take this to the actual community.
Okay.
So being mindful that they're taking a day off work to learn about a possibility.
Yeah.
The least we can do as the ones that are also going to benefit from them participating
Yes.
is take our time and go to their community.
Okay.
One, you're going to learn more about the challenges the community may be facing,
Yes.
but also you're being very respectful for their time.
Yes.
So they're giving that to you. So we need to be giving that to them. So in doing so, you're adding possibly a day or two to a single project, that being a vendor engagement workshop. So if you want to hold multiple workshops in multiple areas, just that scale of the need to have personnel to be able to populate these workshops. There's procurement expertise, there's communications expertise.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, the overall active diplomacy, because it can be challenging. Because let's face it, these business people, our procurement system is very complicated. Maybe more so than it needs to be, but it's what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, especially for the government contract. There are
Exactly.
many procedures in place.
many layers, yes. And so communicating, and then even the tendering. A Government of Canada contract is on their tender site, whereas a BGIS contract is on a Merck site. So the vendors are like, wait a minute, I got to register on 2 separate sites for the same thing?
Oh, yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So it's just understanding how all this comes together and, digesting a bid, putting a bid together. There's part art, part science, because some of these things are extremely complicated and very time consuming. So we're trying to find ways to better communicate with the actual vendors so, they're not just blindly bidding on opportunities.
Yeah.
They're be very precise and calculated on what they're going to bid on. One, to increase their chances of success.
Yeah.
And then hence more participation.
Yeah.
So we're trying to, one, communicate more effectively, and 2, create an environment where there's more success.
Okay.
And that success in itself will lead to greater spend.
Yeah. So we need to come more to them.
Absolutely.
In order for it to be done.
Take
Yeah.
the show to them. Now, in
Yeah.
some cases, we may still have certain procurement activities that are take place in an urban area. But the concentrated efforts are going to be on going into community for sure.
That's it, because the Indigenous workshops you're talking about, some communities are maybe too remote to be able to access those workshops. So is this a plan too, to go in some remote communities that don't have
Where
access
we
to
have
the
opportunity,
workshops?
again, we
Okay.
have to have enough opportunity, and there has to be enough capacity internally to
Oh
match
yeah,
that
yeah,
up.
for sure.
So
When we have the-
there's a bit of a puzzle-solving piece that's going on here as well. So
Okay.
initially, because of our limited team of 3,
yeah,
we're targeting areas where there's either high populations and or significant opportunity on a bid piece, so we can kind of match that up.
Okay, okay.
And then the second piece is, what are the other areas where there is still opportunity and or interest on the Indigenous front to match that? The end goal would be able to have, each of the regions having 3 or 4 locations
Okay.
with 2 or 3 workshops taking place in each year.
That's good.
But when you start
That's
doing the
good.
math,
Yeah.
it escalates very quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
you need people in order to be able
Yeah.
to implement that.
Bigger team is needed, but it's good. And, like it's something that's driving the Indigenous engagement at BGIS to the fact that we have milestones and goals, specific goals to achieve.
Yes.
It's good. It gives like a purpose.
Yeah, and then the other aspect there too is that naturally, once you become more ingrained in the community through a vendor activity or a job fair, because that's another activity we'll be doing,
Yes.
you're going to be more involved with the community. So the next piece is, what are we doing with the communities? Are we sponsoring? How are we supporting them? How are we giving our time to these communities? These are all aspects as our program matures that, again, takes people to do. One of the analogies we use is a relationship on an Indigenous front can take 1,000 cups of coffee or tea to create.
Okay.
And that's supposed to demonstrate that it's the time and the sheer work that it takes to create these relationships.
Okay.
There's no shortcuts. You're gonna have one-on-one. You're gonna have small groups, back to one-on-one, back and forth. So,
Are we planning to go in the communities and manage their building, perhaps? As a facility management company, do we have some plan in place or a goal in place to go there and perhaps manage one of their facilities?
that's an interesting question. Yeah. So, it is something I have raised.
Okay.
I frame that under the development of an Indigenous business line.
Okay.
And that would be twofold. So the first piece would be the buildings or properties that they have on community, or in some cases they own properties that are off. We're seeing more of the off properties develop now.
Okay.
Communities are now investing.
Yeah.
So for instance, on off reserve properties, you're going to have like the Cree in downtown Montreal. Ganawagi from Montreal is looking at developing a real estate investment wing that they need to have someone manage or work with them to manage. So that tells me there is an opportunity there. Other communities that are sophisticated and right across the country, there's multiple multi-billion-dollar projects taking place right now.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they're going to have to be managed. So whether they are institutional or corporate or government, there's a lot of things taking place here. Retail. I know that BGIS doesn't do residential, but there's a lot of other aspects around it that we could be involved in.
Okay.
So I really see an opportunity on that front. And again, addressing it on multiple layers. So working within community, we have an opportunity to bring our economies to scale because we have a multi-billion-dollar purchasing power. I'm sure we can find ways to bring savings to what their current program is.
Okay.
Then we can take what would be traditionally a cost center, so operating to serve your own community, to one that's a profit center by operating and serving the outlying area, whatever they define as their community or their area. That could be an area of opportunity to co-develop.
Okay.
So yes, great question, and I'm hoping that the powers that be see that as an opportunity as well.
Oh yeah, it's great to see that there's a possibility and how it will work out.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'm part of the BGIS Indigenous committee too. I think I joined it at the creation in 2020, and I've been as you said first when you came in. You raised there were 14 projects that had a no and perhaps 5 or 6 that had a yes. And then you said it evaluated. So it's nice to see that Indigenous engagement is growing also inside the company. It's I see more and more people getting interested in Indigenous initiatives, wanting to do their part too.
Absolutely.
So
just the knowledge base.
Yes.
One of the clear examples I use is the first year I came on, 2019, September, I wore my orange shirt to work.
Okay.
No one knew what it meant. I actually had 2 people ask me if it was around the Tim Hortons thing that was going on because they had some orange shirt activity, but it had nothing to do with reconciliation.
Oh yeah.
You fast forward that a few years, and it went from a few hundred people to now we're literally getting close to 1,000 people that are participating in these activities.
That's great.
And they know why these are being addressed. So we have come a long ways. We have a long ways to go. Mm-hmm. But again, when you look back to what we started with, we have come a long ways.
Yeah. Small steps lead to great outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And I saw that recently we have Indigenous training on Percipio, the training hub for BGIS. Mm-hmm. You led the training, and it's now available for employees to work. Is it mandatory for employees or is it?
It is.
It is. Okay.
Our goal is 100% success.
Okay.
It's an absolute.
Yeah.
We have to have everyone take it.
Yeah.
And this stems right from the call to action number 92.
Okay.
There are 3 pieces in that call to action, one of which is cultural awareness that addresses specific topics.
Okay.
So it outlined what it is you have to address.
Okay.
So I ensured that all of those specific topics, plus a few extras, were acknowledged and the knowledge base was provided. Again, this is an introductory course. You can't get too in depth and cover hundreds of years of history in a short time frame. But we can give you that initial knowledge piece. Yeah. I'm hoping in the future there might be like a version 2 of what we've done, something a little more polished, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then we'll also be adding an intermediate and advanced version.
Okay.
So more in-depth knowledge. So it's something we're going to continue to add to.
Yeah.
And there also may be other versions of these programs. There could be one adapted specifically to the needs of the executive.
Yeah.
We'll have senior management, and then of course the entry level segment as well, just so everyone kind of understands on their own context.
Yeah, that's great.
Why we need to know this and what it is we're discussing.
Yes, I think this training is a really great opportunity for employees to know better, because before there wasn't so much information available. Mm-hmm. You had to go do your own research on Google, or mm-hmm. The University of Alberta had their own mm-hmm. Indigenous training course, but you had to look for it, register. So it was quite, you needed to have the will to learn more about Indigenous engagement. So now it's great to have it in our own training hub in Principio. It's great.
Yeah, and you mentioned the University of Alberta's Indigenous Canada course. I took that with my daughter as well, and it was an opportunity to learn. I embrace learning all the time. I'm learning new things, not just about my community, but other communities. So it's fantastic. With over 600 communities across Canada, you can't possibly know everything about everything.
For sure.
There's just too much to know.
Yeah.
So there's a real opportunity there. And then one of the other layers we're adding this year, so every year we do a Indigenous engagement strategic workshop for the regions. So what we want to present as an opportunity for the regions is this year we will also create regionally specific knowledge.
Oh, okay.
So for instance, the specific treaties to that region.
Okay.
How the Indian Act impacted that particular region differently than other areas. How the fur trade may have changed things. What residential schools were in the area, how that impacts, and the multi-generational trauma that we're seeing. Again, every area is different. Yeah. The current state is different. Yeah. So I think there's a need to have that nuance. Yeah. And then fast forward to October when we get to the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. We're hoping to have, end of September. October is when we're hoping to have our Reconciliation Week. Maybe we can take some of the learnings we've had throughout the year and share that during Reconciliation Week. Yeah. So it's part of an ongoing knowledge base and sharing.
Okay. What are the next steps for Indigenous engagement at BGIS?
So again, the program's maturing, so we want to have a more robust program addressing vendor opportunities. So hence, we want to continually add vendors to our system.
Yes.
We want to ensure their participation and success as well. So we want, hence, greater spend, more bids being put in. Yeah. We want to grow our team. Yeah. We want the P&C efforts to reap the benefits and the rewards of the efforts that we're putting in. So, more full-time employees, more contract employees, more consultant jobs, more internships that are going to lead to those jobs as well. So again, getting the BGIS brand out there, educating people on our journey. That will include, 2 paths and how we're addressing Call to Action 92, but also how it also applies and transcends through our organization, and showing that we are invested in this and that we are continually investing in our Indigenous partners. As that grows as well. So that's all part and parcel is going to take place there. That will naturally lead to more business relationships, be they a partnership or a vendor-style relationship. And, of course, more community engagement, because we're going to have more relationships with more communities. Yeah.
Great. And finally, this is a question we love to ask our guests. What is your vision in your current role, and what are you trying to accomplish?
I'm really trying to get to that end game of mutually beneficial partnerships between the Indigenous community and the BGIS as a whole and our client base. I'm trying to grow Indigenous business through indigenization of procurement, so indigenizing procurement, indigenizing our workforce. And we're currently working on something called, or we've branded as Indigenous Design. And we're using that as a procurement tool, whereby we're no longer targeting, like a 5% participation on a project. If we can designate a project or part of a project as an Indigenous design, we have an opportunity to go far greater. It could be 25, 40, in some cases 100% spend. Because you're not only incorporating the design, the engineers, interior designers, and architects, you're also incorporating the service providers and goods providers right from the start. And that allows you to kind of design programs that will be able to meet these higher spend targets. Again, very specific projects will be able to utilize these benefits, but I think we're going to start to see that. And I think our clients are going to appreciate that. One of the challenges we see is that, the back to work experience.
Yeah.
We're just not seeing tremendous success in people coming back to the office. And we're certainly not seeing Indigenous talent being brought in and kept. So to me, that means that we have to change our spaces in order to make it more inviting to the Indigenous community.
Yeah.
And then I believe that there'll be a spinoff. So you're not only going to attract the Indigenous community, you'll attract other youth that have shared values to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that naturally transcends to other aspects that support those workers that are going to be there. So I think it's really indigenizing facilities management, I guess the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And by embracing Call to Action 92 and really taking it to heart and investing in it. That's the key thing here. Not treating it as a cost, it's a social program that it's the right thing to do and we're going to put some money into this and some time, because we should. We're going to invest in this because it is our path forward, and hence we'll grow our own universe.
Mm-hmm.
So the universe of what we currently have grows beyond because of our Indigenous partners and the world that it opens up to us. That's really where my vision is. And what that means, I don't even know myself, because I'm learning things every single day.
Yeah.
So as we learn, what we define as that universe will change. Who our partners are and could be is going to change and be very fluid. And of course, the current services that we have, maybe we start augmenting that. Maybe we hyper-focus on certain specialties that overlap.
Mm-hmm.
These are all areas of opportunity as we go forward.
Good to hear. Well, thank you very much, Wade.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, everyone. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Take care and miigwech.